Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BamaOnLine Big Show. My name's Tim Watts, and I'm the publisher of BamaOnLine. And with us today is Charlie Potter, team extraordinaire, one of my favorite people in the world. He brings a smile to my face, and just to make him smile, that makes my whole day. But Charlie Potter's one of the best in the business. The BamaOnLine Big Show, is the only, we do other shows, but it's the only show we do each week where you get all six of us. Blake Byler, who's Charlie's sidekick, young guy learning from the best, is coming in later on. We got Andrew Bone, the recruiting analyst, recruiting editor. We got Jimmy Stein coming on. Joseph Hastings won't make it today. He's a little bit under the weather. I think he's still recovering from his birthday celebration. But before we get going, I've got a commercial to read you guys. And it's kind of funny. Last time I did one of the comments said I was Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights. And when I went back and watched it, that's who I was. So I'm going to stick strictly to the script. And this is one that we're okay with. Hey, football fans, whether you're cheering on the Tide or Tigers or Crimson Tide on November 9th, plan for a pit stop at the Whataburger food truck during your tailgate. Get ready to watch your team by securing an easy W first with a hot, fresh Whataburger, that is. And no matter who comes out on top, when you take your team to Whataburger, you'll feel like a winner. By getting your food made your way fresh and hot every time, 24/7, see you at the game and see you at Whataburger. Now, they're going to have some kind of and you're welcome to swing by, Charlie. They have some kind of food truck out there. You swing by and get a free burger if you want to. Take a
Nice.
photo op with Whataburger. But anyways, let's get to it. It's Tennessee week. Tennessee week, Charlie. I know. Give me your thoughts. I mean, you've grown up in the state following Alabama. Give me your thoughts on Tennessee week. As a reporter, what does it mean to you?
I think this week's a lot of fun. I know that in the past, this week also, just from a what I do standpoint, you get a lot of the same questions. You get a lot of questions to the out-of-state players about what they knew about the rivalry. You get to find out, who even knows what a cigar is. I think during this week, I think that's putting the cart before the horse this year. But I think that it's a big deal, and I think Kalen DeBoer is very aware of that going into his first third Saturday in October. I think it's a big deal to the state. I think the older crew, it means a lot, but I think the younger crew, now that you have what happened a couple years ago in Knoxville, because you and I both know, like, a rivalry, you have to have some give and take for it to be. You
Sure.
have to have real hatred there. So I think what happened a couple years ago has really rejuvenated this. And I don't want to say it's a good thing, because it was very impressive what Alabama was doing to Tennessee. But I think from just this game standpoint, it added some juice. And I think this trip to Knoxville is going to be very interesting, because the last time it felt different. The crowd was one of the best that I've ever been in, and we're up in the clouds and in a closed press box. But I expect it to be the same. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know it rejuvenated this rivalry because the whole week leading up to that Tennessee game in Knoxville where Alabama lost, there was discussion on the BOL roundtable whether or not they were a big rivalry anymore, whether it was a rivalry when they snatched them goalposts down and carried them to the river. I think Alabama fans realized they still weren't fans of the Orange. So, what's it like with the media up there? This is stuff we've never talked about off the record. I know our guys at VolQuest are great guys. I've been friends with some of them a long time, some of my closest friends. What is the media? How's the media treated in Knoxville?
It Alabama fans probably don't want to hear this, but it's one of the best. The press box is up high, like I said, but Tennessee does some things that others don't. They have an old school, like, it's a huge chalkboard, like right when you get off the elevator, and somebody goes by and they update the scores like as they happen. Just really old school vibe. They also feed you after the game, which I don't need a halftime meal. Alabama gives you a Denny dog at halftime. I don't need a get in a line with a bunch of like-minded reporters for hot dogs. Give me a post game, a slice of pizza or something, and that's the best. But I will say, like, the guys that we've worked with are alongside at both 24/7 and on three have been great from a Tennessee perspective. They've I'm glad we don't have to deal with Wes Rucker anymore, but it's been a lot of fun. And I'll say this too, going back to last year in the media experience, post game's a little tough because you really have to traverse the whole stadium to get to the other side, and that was a job 2 years ago with the field storming, and then afterwards. I don't know that I've seen some of the things that I saw ever in my life. I saw an old lady get arrested. I saw people just falling down You can guess why, but it was a circus, and it's usually a lot of fun around there. I think it's a decent stadium. It's a decent view, and just from a media standpoint, they treat you pretty well.
Yeah, going into this game, out and again talking to the Tennessee guys yesterday, nobody has a great feel for what's going to happen. I mean, after the fact, we'll go, yeah, that's what I figured. But I mean, I don't have a great feel of what's going to happen. Or, I mean, I know what Alabama's capable of, and I know what Tennessee's probably capable of. We haven't seen yet, but just what are some of your loose expectations for this game as far as this week of preparation to get ready for a loud boisterous crowd, and how much do you think it affects Alabama to be playing at 2:30 instead of 6:30 also?
Yeah, well, going back to what you said to begin with, this is a tough game to predict because both teams are kind of in the same boat. They're coming off of a disappointing loss and a disappointing performance against teams that aren't at the top of the league. So it's tough. This one could really go either way. But I think from a week of preparation standpoint, I think Alabama's had good practices. I think they've had good intensity. It comes down to execution at the end of the day. I think they have solid plans. I think from an adjustment standpoint, they've tried to make those. Maybe they need to do a little more, but. This past week, you could really see just from an execution standpoint, that's where things were lacking. I mean, hell, it feels weird going into week 8 of the season to be asking a question about tackling, but Alabama missed 11 tackles in the last game. They missed 11 in the Vanderbilt game. The games they've played the worst have been double-digit missed tackles. That's these past 2 games, and then the South Florida game where the final score isn't an indicator, but that thing was close in the fourth quarter when it shouldn't have been. So that just comes down to fundamental football. And if Alabama can clean some of those things up, if they can get the guy to the ground instead of standing him up and trying to rip at the ball, which I know the Swarm defense, that's what you're trying to do. But the guy that initiates the contact, get the guy to the ground. It's simple things that I think you could just tweak here and there, or just kind of preach a little more, and you could clean up some of these mistakes, not all. But I think from a preparation standpoint, fundamental execution, I think if you can do that, you'll be in a much better spot.
Yeah, this game to me, I think we expected Tennessee to easily be undefeated, and we expected Alabama at worst to have one loss at Georgia. But even then, if Alabama beats Georgia, this is a huge game. Game day's there. There's so much, but I don't know if game day'd be there or not with Georgia, Texas. That's actually a tough
Mhm.
decision.
It's something we talked about because Georgia Texas is a sexy game. Let's be real. But then with Alabama beating Georgia, like you said, if these teams are undefeated going in, I don't know how you don't pick this
Yeah.
game, because Neyland Stadium now, after what happened a couple years ago, it's going to be off the charts. I think that would have also pushed this game to the primetime spot. This would have been the night game, and then Georgia Texas would have been the 2:30 game. And I didn't mention that, but you said earlier. I don't know how it affects them that much. I mean, Alabama's kind of a morning team now. They've had a ton of these late games. The first 3 games of the season, or the first 2 games of the season were late. The Georgia game was late. It gives you time to get ready for the game. I don't think it's one way or the other. I do think the crowd noise, though, that'll be something different because as much as people want to bring up Nick Saban's comment about Vanderbilt, he didn't tell a lie. The crowd in First Bank Stadium was not the reason Vanderbilt won that game,
No, not at
because it
all.
was it was 75-25 Alabama fans at least. And then at Wisconsin, we talked about it before, they were spilling out of the stadium as soon as Jump Around played. So Alabama hasn't played in a raucous road environment yet. This is kind of going to be the first, and it's going to be arguably the loudest they're going to face. I mean, they got to go to Tiger Stadium in November too, but this one's going to be off the charts. And I think that from a preparation standpoint is going to be very important for this offense this week.
I think more sober yelling's better than more drunk yelling. That's why I think the 2:30 road game's always an advantage. I mean, the SEC college students have a whole day getting hyped, tailgating, and everything, so I do think it helps them. Um, Going into just we're not going to talk about a lot about South Carolina, but the thing about this Alabama team is they can be good, but when they're off the rails, when they give up the fourth down touchdown, then they come back and get a penalty on a dead kickoff, they get a safety, offsides on the punt. I mean, dude, it just comes off, and then you saw that at the close of that game. I mean, I don't think we're in the right state of mind. And I was thinking it when it happened. I was like, I wish Jeremy had went down. I wish Jeremy'd slid. I mean, it's not Jeremy's fault. I mean, he's trained to score touchdowns, but I thought I wish he'd have went down, just ran it out. Um, but then again, I didn't know they were going to go straight down the field. I mean, they got onside kick left with 43 seconds left.
Yeah, I mean, with that, you go up by 8, you feel good. You're supposed to, at least. Your defense get a stop, and then hell, you take them or you let them come down and score. You stop them on the 2-point conversion. You expect to recover the onside kick. It's simple things, and the onside kick was a little weird, but I
Yeah,
think
it was.
3 or 4 different guys had a shot at that football from an Alabama standpoint. So you got to
Mhm.
be able to come up with that. I think they need to maybe reconfigure that hands team because the guys there were think 2 tight ends and a running back. That's just my opinion. But yeah, it's the end of half into game has been tough. Kalen DeBoer kind of talks about that middle eight. A lot of coaches do. Heck, Nate Oates talks about it. But the final 4 minutes of the first half and just the start of the third quarter was tough to watch because you mentioned it. They had that 12-point swing there at the end of the second quarter, and then to come out after halftime and just put together a 16-play drive and march right down the field. You can't have that. So there's a lot of little mistakes, but there's still the big picture with the third down issues and things like that. There's plenty to clean up, but you're right. This Alabama team, when it's on, like the start of the game, you come out, you
Yeah.
score quick, you get off the field, bottle that up somehow. If you do that, then you'll be in good shape.
We're going to bring in Blake Byler. Blake, welcome to the show, joining us. You've been listening in the background. We're talking a little bit like when Alabama does get off the rails, it's just hard to see them get back on it. I mean, we've seen that enough now. I still think the special team, I mean, nobody's really talked about the special team penalties have been huge. Even go back to the Georgia game. How did that last touchdown happen? Alabama ended up down in the ball, what, the 2 or 3 yard line on a muff kickoff? And they ended up getting a couple first, didn't they? But they're still punting. If you get a couple first after getting the ball to 25, you're punting near midfield. Burnup's going to pin them deep. Instead, come right back 67-yard touchdown. Again, we were talking about, Blake, your thoughts on closing out these halves. That's where everything needs to start, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's really a lot of give and take with it because Kalen DeBoer's a naturally really aggressive coach. And so you're going to have games where they are taking, like Kalen DeBoer's always taking timeouts at the end of half if they have a chance to get a stop, get the ball back. He's trying to go for the home run ball. He's trying to score at the end of halves. And it worked out for him against Wisconsin earlier in the season when Alabama got the ball with, I think, 38 seconds. They threw a deep ball to Ryan Williams, and then they threw another touchdown the next play to Jeremy Bernard. And everybody kind of praised him for that because, even under Nick Saban was never that aggressive towards the end of half. And with this offense and with the personnel that they have, you've got the guys to go score in such a short amount of time. So I don't think that's going to change. But in the last couple of games, especially against South Carolina, you just saw poor execution in those moments. And that's kind of the risk reward that you have when you are playing that aggressive. Because against South Carolina, Alabama could have kind of coasted into the half with a 7-point lead, and instead you end up with the safety. So then you have a 5-point lead, you get a stop, you get the ball back. Could have gone into half with a 5-point lead, but then you throw the interception that gets ran back, and then they kick the field goal, and that's another 3 points on the board for South Carolina. So the risk that comes with it is tough, especially when they're not executing. But I don't see that changing anytime soon with how much confidence that DeBoer has in this offense and how much confidence he's instilled in guys like Jalen Milroe and these wide receivers. They're going to keep going for it at the end of half. And I think it's going to work out for them a couple times, but there are going to be times like this past Saturday where it doesn't. And that's going to be a potentially tough blow in games that end up being close like that.
Charlie, is this a crossroads game for the season? I know it looks like it on the surface because right now everybody doesn't have 2 losses, but the way the season's going, and I know it's harder for you guys. Y'all are in the booth all day and all, but I'm watching a lot of teams scrape by, with these wins, come close to losing. Oregon beats Ohio State. Boise State had Oregon beat. What are your thoughts on in the middle of the season, it seems like a must-win game, but at the end of the season, it might not be so much.
It does kind of feel like a mini playoff game because I think the team that loses it's going to be tough to get in, just because that means you have 2 losses, and we've seen them play kind of uninspiring football here the last few weeks. You wonder what it does to a team's psyche a little bit too, because this right here, I mean, we talked about it since the schedule came out, this to me was the defining stretch of the season, because you go on the road to Tennessee, you host a Missouri team that I think we all thought was going to be a little better. But then, you get your bye and you go to the LSU. It's a tough 3-game stretch for any team. And I think I thought this is where we were going to learn the most about Alabama. We still very well could. But I think, with you have 2 losses, that feels like the minimum, or maybe the maximum you can have to get into this playoff. But the way that the league has kind of cannibalized itself outside of Texas, you never know. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. I think this Georgia-Texas game is going to be fascinating from that standpoint. If Georgia comes away with a win in Austin, you have all teams in the SEC, or no undefeated teams in the SEC. So it's tough, but I think this does kind of feel like the winner has a much better shot at making the playoff, and the loser might be on the outside looking in. But there's still a lot of football left. I mean, it feels like this season's flown by, and it really has, but there's still, we're at the midway point. There's still half this regular season to go. So there's plenty of time to clean things up. But I think the team that wins this game feels much better about their playoff hopes.
Blake, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the loser of this game is definitely kind of put behind the 8 ball when it comes to both SEC championship and college football playoff discussions. But it's not a mathematical eliminator. Like the losing team is still going to have a chance to make the college football playoff. We know that there are going to be 2 lost teams in the playoff. And also the loser still has a chance to make it to Atlanta for the SEC championship. Because like you said, if Texas were to lose to Georgia, then there are no undefeated teams left in the SEC. So then a 2-loss team is 1 game back of first place. So with no divisions, it makes things really different and really interesting when it comes for the race to getting to Atlanta, because there's not a division for you to win. But I would be worried about maybe the psyche, like you mentioned, Charlie, of the team if they were to lose. I mean, this would be their 2nd loss in 3 weeks. And also it would be, I assume if they lose, they're not going to be necessarily playing a great game. It would be their 3rd consecutive game where they didn't play very well. And it could have very easily, if things went differently against South Carolina last week, a couple plays went different, it could have been their 3rd loss in a row. So you don't feel very good if you lose this game, especially needing a bounce back type performance coming off of Vanderbilt. You didn't exactly get it against South Carolina. It looked like you could have from the start of the game, but it kind of faded off and ended up being a way closer game than you anticipated. So then if you come out and lose to Tennessee, even though it's a tough road game, like you still don't feel very good going into still a couple of tough games left on the schedule. Missouri isn't as good as we thought, and that game is at home. But again, we've seen Alabama struggle with worse teams. And then you've got to go to LSU, and they look pretty good after beating Ole Miss this past week, and they're in the top 10. So the schedule doesn't necessarily get any easier. And so if you lose this game, you're not feeling great. But if you win it, I mean, you kind of feel like you're back on track and you're back in kind of the driver's seat for potentially getting to Atlanta, depending on what happens in that Georgia-Texas game. So it can give you a huge boost if you do win it. So I think crossroads is a good way to put it, Tim, because you're kind of, it is a fork in the road. You're going to go one of 2 different directions. But I don't think a loss will eliminate you from anything. It's just going to be really pressure-filled the rest of the season.
What it's probably done, though, is, it's taken away your 2 mulligans. I mean, when you looked at this season in the SEC, you didn't say anybody needed 1 loss. You're like, you can lose a game, you can lose 2 games. I think it helps Vanderbilt beating Kentucky. Another double-digit dog goes and they win on the road. I mean, obviously a little bit better than we thought. The national team thought helped a lot by the portal, and that staff's doing a good job. So it does take away those 2 mulligans. So at that point, you're win out. Also, I don't think you want to roll into the SEC championship game with 2 losses either. I mean, that's the ideal situation with 2 losses is to be in the playoffs and skip that SEC championship game. That's not the most competitive way to look at it, but that's probably the best way, Charlie Potter.
No doubt, yeah. I mean, because if you say you lose this game, but then the rest of the league continues to be chaos, you get to Atlanta and then you lose, then you're out of it. You would like to be able to probably rest up because it's going to be a tough slate. But it's just it's almost confusing at this point because so many things can happen. So many teams are kind of right there in the same boat. And I don't think Texas has looked pretty good. I think that they've been kind of the cream of the crop through the first half of the regular season, but everyone else has just kind of had some stinkers. It's been an interesting year for the league, and we're a long way from Atlanta, but right now it's kind of tough to predict who's going to be there. And you're right. I mean, from a playoff standpoint, it's not something that you put on your board at the beginning of the season from a goals as a team. But if you can still get to that playoff and maybe skip that, yeah, I think that you take that.
Blake Byler. It's almost basketball. No, wait. I saved this lead in for you. It's almost basketball season. I feel like before we get out of here, we got to talk about that. Nate Oates, you had a great tweet with a schedule with Nate Oates playing 4, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 19, 21, 23, 24, and 25 in his schedule this year. Those are the ranked teams that Nate Oates has to play. I think he loves it.
Oh, he definitely does. I mean, you even look at last year's team, and when they started going on that run in the NCAA tournament, a lot of the guys attributed Alabama's tough non-conference schedule to kind of the reason that they were able to come together at the end of the season and play as well as they did. And whenever you look back, a lot of Alabama fans were panicking back in December because Alabama was 6-5 and had lost 3 games in a row. They had played pretty well, but that just goes to show you how different of a sport basketball is than football, because you had the team sitting there at 6-5, but you had taken a lot of positives away from those losses to Purdue, Creighton, and Arizona, where they had lost all 3 of those games. And so I think Nate Oates is trying to put together the same kind of schedule this year. Honestly, he probably put together a tougher schedule this year. Yeah. I think this is the toughest schedule that he's had, and he's put together some really tough ones in his time at Alabama. And so maybe they're not planning on starting the season 6-5 this year. They probably have a little bit better roster, but I mean, even if they do drop a couple games, like, you're going to learn a lot about this team, and this team's really going to learn a lot about themselves and each other as they go through these games against Creighton again, Purdue again. You've got a game in Birmingham against Illinois. You've got North Carolina on the schedule. They go out to Vegas and play Houston, which is like the highest ranked preseason team on their schedule. They play a solid Rutgers team who has 2 projected lottery picks in the NBA draft. Like, everywhere you look on the schedule, even the mid-major teams, like, you've got McNeese with Will Wade coming to Coleman Coliseum, and they're like a fringe top 25 team. They're receiving votes. And then you look at Arkansas State with Brian Hodgson, former Alabama assistant. Like, that team was picked to win the Sun Belt. So that's a potential NCAA tournament team. You've just got good tests all the way around. And with a team this talented and this deep that Nate Oates has talked up as his deepest and best roster that he's had, you want to get these kind of tests so you can learn what you have and what works and what doesn't before you get into the SEC play. And speaking of a tough schedule, I mean, the SEC is rating out by a lot of these preseason ratings as the best conference in college basketball this year. And it's been a really long time since we've been able to say that. And they've been up there with some of the best the past few years, but it seems like right now that going into the season, the SEC is the best conference in the sport. They've got 9 teams in the preseason top 25, which is pretty unheard of when you think of how SEC basketball was even 5 years ago. So you've got a really tough schedule on the non-conference that's going to have to prepare you for an almost even tougher schedule in conference play. But if there's any team that's going to be able to navigate it, I think this team has the roster and the depth to be able to do so.
Charlie, it was a couple of years ago when Bama lost to UConn in the preseason. All the fans were very upset with losing to UConn. They didn't know UConn was then what they would be. I mean, you and I and others on the board were like, I don't know, they look pretty damn good to me. That didn't look like losing to a bad team. Then, of course, that epic run. I think that's what Nate Oates has kind of built his team around, that tough schedule, pushing it, talent, young talent and old talent.
Yeah, he wants to expose this team before you get to conference play. And I mean, when we were waiting on this non-conference schedule to be completed, I think they had a couple spots left. And we were thinking that maybe, hell, he might try to get the Celtics on there. Like, he's not afraid to play anybody anywhere. Just look, they're playing a game at North Dakota. I know that's not showing up on the AP poll, but I mean, he's doing that for Grant Nelson, and Nate Oates will play anybody wherever. I think if there was a game on the moon, he would be first in line to go play it. But I mean, hell, you look at UConn. UConn's number 3 in the AP poll. I'm sure their Twitter, after dealing with them out in Phoenix last year, is handling that very admirably. But I was kind of shocked that Alabama wasn't number 1 in the AP poll. I know we kind of talked about that yesterday, but I had the story ready for number one. I thought they would be with the roster they returned, the pieces they added, the way that Nate Oates has talked so confidently about this team, like Blake said. But I think he has put a lot of this on Alabama himself, but he's also going to have to kind of do the Nick Saban thing with the rat poison, because there's going to be a lot of people, showering Alabama with praise over the next several weeks and months. And you're going to have to combat that, because I think this team is good. I think they know they're good, but they can't think they're too good, because they're going to have some tough competition really day in and day out when they come to, getting into this regular season.
All right. You can find Charlie Potter and Blake Byler's work at BamaOnLine.com. They do a terrific job of covering the team. They're also active on the message board, and we've had some good discussions these past week. We have found out Bama Online has a lot of defensive coordinators and a lot of roster builders, but we love the discussion. The fan base is fantastic. Later in the week, we're going to Charlie, Blake, and Jimmy Stein will have the preview show for the Tennessee game. And guys, we look forward to seeing you next week. Appreciate it.
No problem. Miss you today, Blake. He'll be at basketball. I'll be at football, so we'll be apart.
Oh, man. This is
I know.
It's a sad day for us all. All right. See you guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, Tim.
All right. We're bringing in our basketball expert, Andrew Bone. Hello, Andrew Bone and Jimmy Stein to the show. How are y'all doing?
Very good.
Finally here.
Everybody's excited about hoops this year. I know it's hard not to be. It has nothing to do with football. Football team can be undefeated. There's still, if you're a basketball guy, I think you're pretty excited. Before we get going, I've got a commercial to read. I saved this for Andrew. I had to read it earlier, Andrew.
You know how to read.
So I got another one. This one's close to all of our hearts. I feel comfortable that all three of us can at least understand where this commercial is going. Whataburger here with the word for all the football fans in the audience. We're off to a good start, right? Whataburger. Everybody,
I'm a fan.
Food late at night.
I'm a fan.
If you're tailgating at the LSU versus Alabama game on November 9th, they'll be there serving up hot and fresh Whataburger for you and your crew. So make sure to take an important detour on your way in and on your way to the win. And remember, your local Whataburger is already ready to feed the team, made to order, 100% fresh, served 24/7. That's the easiest win you'll get all season. That actually is easy for me. I spend a lot of money there. My kids love it, and it is open.
You were made to cut.
No, I did that. I did it last time, and I tried to do it freestyle. And you remember you were on the show, and it's just uncomfortable. And then one of the comments on YouTube, which had me roaring, said, "Tim looks like Ricky Bobby on Talladega Nights when he was doing those commercials." And I was like, "All right, I'm sticking to the script." All right, boys, here we are. The Vanderbilt loss doesn't look as bad as it once did. I mean, I was watching that game. That was a strong win that they had there against a Kentucky team that has been competitive for the most part. Jimmy, I think that changes a little. I know, obviously, the South Carolina struggle in that game still at the forefront, but I think Vanderbilt being maybe a competitive team helps things out a little bit.
No doubt there's who knows if Alabama will still be in the discussion or not, but there is a committee that decides the playoffs, and they look at all sorts of metrics, including strength of schedule. At this point, the more good things Vanderbilt does, the more that helps Alabama out with several of those strength of record and strength of schedule metrics. So Alabama fans need to be sort of a Vandy fan here down the stretch. And Vanderbilt's got a couple of winnable games coming up. I think their games against Ball State and Auburn are extremely winnable for them, and that would get them to 6 wins in a bowl. This isn't a typical Vanderbilt team. We said it at the time. I give a lot of credit to Diego Pavia himself. I think he's one of those type quarterbacks guys that he raises he raises everyone up around him. Pavia makes the running backs better. He makes the wide receivers better. He makes his line better. He's just a guy that's really transformed that program. I wouldn't go too far with it. They're not going to win 8 or 9 games, but this is not your typical Vanderbilt team at all.
Yeah, the thing about seeing this with the schedule Saturday, was that, Andrew Bone, you were at home, was that the best college football weekend you can remember? I mean, Alabama made it close, and we lasted all the way through the night with Colorado and Kansas State. I think every game was highly competitive.
Yeah, you look at the schedule and you're like, okay, there's a few good games that are going to be played. There's some games that are going to be interesting, but then you know, most of the time they end up being blowouts and they're not very competitive. It seemed like every single game on Saturday was competitive. You can even look at the Georgia-Mississippi State game. You know, Mississippi State put up 31 points against Georgia. That's, you know, nobody expected that to happen. You know, even though Georgia had it, you know, pretty much in hand. But those late games, you know, the Oregon-Ohio State game, the Tennessee-Florida game, the LSU-Ole Miss game, and then as you mentioned, that Kansas State Colorado game, which I'll admit I did. I cashed out at the at halftime on that one, but man, it was a fun day of football. I know it was, you know, kept everybody on their toes with that Alabama and South Carolina game, but man, overall great, you know, fantastic day just enjoying college football after
And that really is. I know the stress levels there for most fan bases, and I know that, like, you know, Alabama fans think Alabama fans are bad after a loss or the struggle, but you go to any program with a history of winning. Go to Georgia; they won by 10 against Mississippi State. Go read their board. You know, read Ole Miss right now. They're the, you know, and I imagine they are a little irritated, but Ole Miss with that second loss, and you know, if you're a team, Tennessee, they won against one of their bitter rivals in very dramatic fashion, and are mad. I was talking to our VolQuest guys, and we were like, who's madder? And I was like, it's a Spider-Man meme where you're like, that's who, like, we're all mad. You know, we're firing Kalen DeBoer, we're cutting Nico. You know, we got all this stuff, all the overreactions. But, Jimmy, the schedule was so good. And I don't know how much you saw, but I know you definitely saw before and after. I didn't even realize Illinois and Purdue played a 50-49 game until the next day. I was like, I didn't see that score. Usually I'd have been checked in on that.
The beauty of college football, and there's so much to it, the beauty of it is it's impossible to see it all. It's impossible to see all the great things that happen throughout even a typical college football Saturday. But last Saturday was non-typical because so many of the truly big games were great games that played out to the very end. And then, like you said, the Purdue Illinois game, you know, that was on nobody's radar, ends up being one of the great games of the weekend. It's impossible to see it all, but what you do see is fantastic. And I do credit, if credit's the right word, you know, NIL and the portal in terms of creating some parity that maybe college football been missing for a while. I think there's just a little more parity. I'm not going to turn this into the Diego Pavia show, but that's just a good example of how the transfer portal transformed Vanderbilt too, even though other programs like Alabama have feasted on Vanderbilt players like Tyler Steen. You know, and Alabama can go get Tyler Steen from Vanderbilt, improve their offensive line. Vanderbilt can go to New Mexico State, get their quarterback, and improve their program. So the transfer portal really is beneficial to most Power 4 football teams. It's the group of 5 that gets rated, and the FCS, which gets rated even worse because the FCS gets rated by the Power 4 and the group of 5. But there is a food chain type thing that's being created that's sort of creating some level of parity.
Well, I think the level of parity comes with experience, right? I think we've seen, like, it's better for Vanderbilt to have 6 additions that are 4th or 5th year guys who've been in those battles because they are battle tested. I mean, to me, there's nothing college football really can do. I know a lot of people are down on it, but this reminds me of, like, I'm a baseball from I was young. My uncle, every time something happened, the DH, I'm done. You know what I mean? Every time something happened in Major League Baseball, he was done. Still watching it probably right now. Last night's replay. All right, guys, it is Tennessee week. It is Tennessee week. Andrew Bone, what does this week mean to you as a fan growing up? What does it mean? I mean, it still has that same love for this weekend that it always has for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, growing up, you know, going to Knoxville, you know, the rivalry, of course, the Albert Means fiasco several years ago, you know, was all you know, into that. So, you know, it's been you know, the 15 straight years of beating Tennessee was kind of wild. I mean, obviously they had their big win 2 years ago in Knoxville, but man, we, you know, been to a lot of great games, seen a lot of unbelievable environments, and you know, have a lot of great memories, especially that that 2009 season. But you know, it goes back even further, and you know, I had a lot of great times watching Alabama and Tennessee. Everybody looks at Alabama and LSU as a big rivalry. I still, you know, they have been because of recruiting, because of Nick Saban. But you know, I still look at Tennessee as being, you know, that rival next to Auburn is kind of the main two.
Yeah, I agree. The tradition there is just unparalleled. And I grew up, and I'm not sure y'all knew this, but I mentioned it earlier. I had two brothers that were Tennessee fans, and I had one that was an Alabama fan. So we basically had a no trash talking rule. So we never had to, although that really sucked in that long win streak for Bama. We were stuck there. I'm like, I really wish I'd have eaten those 7 year trash talking to have 15. But it means everything to me still, Jimmy. I love it, the tradition. And I mean, you're talking about everything's changing. This hasn't changed. It's still the 3rd October, the 3rd Saturday in October. It's still the same game.
Yeah, it's one of college football's great traditions, not just Alabama's, not just Tennessee's. I think when you say the 3rd Saturday in October to any college football fan across the country at Penn State or USC or Wyoming, if you say the 3rd Saturday in October, they know that means Alabama, Tennessee. And the history of the series is unbelievable. So many memorable moments on both sides, so many win streaks on both sides. One thing that really diminished the series, though, and this is good for Alabama fans, is Nick Saban's arrival and the creation of the Alabama dynasty under Nick Saban kind of coincided with the crash and burn of Tennessee football for so long to where the series wasn't competitive at all. I used to be able to go through, okay, this happened in 88 and this happened in 89 and this happened. I would memorize like every game. I could tell you 12, 13, 14, 20 years ago, hey, this is what happened in the 93 Tennessee game, which was a tie, and Heath Schuler was Tennessee's quarterback. Now the Saban dynasty made that all a blur. It's hard to distinguish the Alabama-Tennessee games from year to year throughout the Saban dynasty because so many of them look the same. They're just Alabama blowouts that weren't even particularly memorable. But I think the memories are coming back, guys, because 2022 in Knoxville, last year, a highly competitive big game that helped propel Alabama to the SEC championship game. Tennessee's very good again. Credit Josh Heupel with improving that program. And I think the series is very competitive right now, and it's going to remain so for a while. So I think the classic Alabama-Tennessee is sort of back.
Again, we discussed this earlier in the show, but I mean, leading up to that 2022 game, there was a lot of discussion, right? Is this a rivalry? Does this mean what it used to be? So I told Charlie Potter, when they snatched those goalposts up and headed for the river, Alabama fans realized quickly how much this still meant to them. So I love the rivalry. I think all the rivalry games, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee, and the Iron Bowl, all of it, that's the one thing that they can't take from us in college football. Or I am going to be pissed, Andrew. I kind of let in for you to talk about me being angry. So I meant your thoughts on keeping those traditions going.
You're always angry. It's okay.
I'm always angry.
I love the tradition, the Alabama, Tennessee. I think, Tennessee's recruited extremely well. I think Tennessee recruiting at type of level that we used to see Tennessee before Nick Saban arrived. I think that certainly helped their program. Josh Heupel and that staff have done a great job recruiting. From the inside out, they've built their rosters, at the offensive line, defensive line. You look at their offensive linemen. I mean, it's a senior-led group outside of Lance Hurd, who's their left tackle. Outstanding group of defensive linemen. And, they went out and got a star quarterback from the West Coast. Has he lived up to those expectations yet? I don't think he has, but it's also his first, full year starting. He's also, he's also got a lot of talent. He's got a great arm. He can make plays happen, and he's got some veteran wide receivers out there that can make plays. And, it's going to be a big challenge for this young secondary at Alabama.
I think the biggest disservice that was done to Nico was everybody knowing his NIL deal.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I mean, literally the $2 million a year, 4 years, $8 million. For knowing those details just changed everything, and that's what I saw with the Tennessee fan base. So he's got to, he's making a decently healthy, quarterback in the NFL salary as a rookie. So I think that did him a disservice, Jimmy. But before we go, we're going to give our favorite play. I don't even know what my favorite play is. I know the plays that stand out to me, but do us a favor, give us a like and subscribe, hit that thumbs up button. We appreciate the content here. We're steady growing towards 11,000. We all have a good time with the show. We all have fun. We're all friends, even, behind the scenes, although sometimes Andrew's more of a friend of me. But Jimmy's actually a friend. Me and Andrew can headlock each other from time to time. But give us a thumbs up and a like. We appreciate you being here. Jimmy, I know you're going to give me 25. Give me one, just one that stand like a memory. And it could be for Tennessee or whoever. Just give us a memory from this series that comes to mind when they mention it.
Immediately for me, even though it wasn't a good season for Alabama at all, but it was 1990, the Philip Doyle field goal to beat Tennessee in Knoxville, when Lee Corso said before the game Alabama had as much chance to win that game as a high school team. Tennessee was a powerful football team that season. Alabama was a huge underdog. Alabama had lost 3 games to start the season. No one gave Alabama a chance, and the defense that day, I'll never forget how good that defense was. And I think Alabama won 9-6 on a last-second field goal by Philip Doyle. And the field position that was gained for making that field goal came from a blocked kick. Tennessee was trying to win the game to go up 9-6. Alabama blocked the kick. The ball miraculously rolled backwards about 25 yards. No way the Alabama offense would have made 25 yards, but the ball rolled about 25 yards. Doyle made the kick, and I was in school then and had a class with Philip Doyle. That next Monday when Philip came to class, that was a fun day.
I bet it was. Andrew Bone, what's a thought? What pops up in your mind?
I think there was a few different ways I was going to go, but I think I'm going to go back to 2002 in Knoxville. It just constantly pops in my mind every time I think about the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry, and that pass behind the line of scrimmage that everyone thought was not a forward, or everyone thought was a forward pass, and Gerald Dixon just runs up, picks it up, runs and scores. I can't even remember how long it was, but it was a long touchdown run on defense, and Alabama went down into Knoxville, won, I think 34 to 13.
Sounds right.
It was a blowout win, and Alabama was not supposed to win that game at all. And so that's a memory that always jumps back. But obviously the big
there's
one.
So many.
There's so many.
I wish Joseph was here so he could tell us his favorite memory in the series and it'd be from last year's game, and I could mute him when he said it. I tell you, mine's always going to be, because he's one of my favorite players, and he was a Saint. It's always going to be Roman Harper causing that fumble. Stressful ass game. Stressful. What was that 6-3 final? Brody hit somebody on that left sideline for a big game. Came in, kicked the field goal.
DJ or Keith Brown? It was one of the two that he hit.
It was 22, which DJ wore, but I don't remember. Was that? I don't remember.
DJ had monster games against Tennessee. I
can't remember.
I think
DJ played with Brody.
Big ones.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
DJ did? Well, it was 22
did.
on that. I remember Brody threw that frozen rope. It was good coverage. Caught that pass, kicked the field goal, 6-3. But that guy was walking in the end zone. And you talking about that was sell your soul for a hit? That was Roman Harper. He did it in high school. That's how he got a scholarship. He did it at Alabama. And then, of course, he did it with the Saints.
Everybody watching this right now is like, how in the hell do y'all not mention Rocky Block at all?
Yeah.
It was on my list, but look, I did not want to lead into a tangent of y'all say Nick Saban didn't have close games with teams much more. That was a 7-6 Lane Kiffin team.
Yeah, that Tennessee team wasn't good. That's the thing that always frustrates me about that game is, yes, that was a great moment in Alabama history. No telling. It would have wrecked Alabama's national championship had Terrence Cody not blocked the kicks. That wasn't a good Tennessee team at all. That was Nick Saban.
I didn't mention it, Andrew,
exactly.
Because I'm with Jimmy. The minute this is the worst week, because I'm like, Nick Saban had plenty of games against inferior opponents.
It was the loudest Bryant-Denny Stadium.
It was crazy.
Possibly it's ever been.
It was pandemonium. That's true. It was pandemonium.
Cody's reaction. Who can remember Cody running off the? You know what I mean? Running off the field. Speaking of a good recruiting story, a guy that was like committed to Alabama, and they're like, you got to get down to 340 or whatever it was. He had to lose to 340 to come on, and then to have such a big impact. Let's switch before we kick Jimmy Stein out of the boys club. Jimmy, excitement level for basketball? It's here.
It's through the roof. It's through the roof. I mean, I'll just explain. I'll just put it this way. This is how excited I am. And yes, I probably have jinxed some seasons doing this, but thanks to Saban, now before seasons start, always look where the national championship is. And me and my buddies I travel with to away games, we make reservations before the season even starts at the national championship site or near it and make plans. I've never done that in basketball until now. I mean, I have. Yeah. I mean, I can get rid of them, but I've got reservations in San Antonio for the Final Four. And I've never done that my whole life. I've been annually doing it for football since about 2009. But in basketball, that's new for me. So I guess that pretty much explains the excitement level
Well,
I have.
me and Andrew appreciate that kind of, being that forethought, because we'll just come stay with you. We'll just wait till the last minute.
I do
We'll
have
just take it easy
a
to see.
place.
Andrew Bone, you're excited too. Number 2, a little bit surprised. I think a lot of us thought number 1, but I think Nate Oates had a speech for the number 1 or the number 2, so there's a motivation behind either of them.
Yeah, I love it. I love being number 2. You don't want to be number 1 to start the season. Everybody's gunning for you. Stay at number 2. Just stay there all season long. Be comfortable. Go into the tournament. Be the second number 1 seed. Everything's gonna be fine. But now I'm looking forward to the season. Obviously, they got their banner hung, Final Four banner. Maybe it's a different one after this season. But really excited. Got a great team,
Yeah.
and looked like things went pretty well at the scrimmage the other night. Some guys that stood out seemed to have a really good game on top of the guys that we all know about. Excited about the season.
Jimmy Stein, we're going to let you get out of here. You guys can find Jimmy Stein at BamaOnLine.com. He's especially active on the message board, Andrew and I and Jimmy, and and Joseph jumps in there too, Charlie and Blake. Jimmy will be with Blake Byler and Charlie Potter later in the week to do the Tennessee preview show. You can find that right here. All you have to do for notifications is hit like and subscribe, and we will send it right to you so you're notified. And there is no spam that comes with it. It's just a straight, here's our show. Well, Jimmy, we appreciate you, man.
See y'all next week.
Hi, buddy. Alone at last.
And
you don't look as excited as me, huh?
Finally,
you're a little blurry, which I like. Like whenever you're clear, I just do this.
Thanks.
All right, we're headed to the recruiting segment. Joseph Hastings can't make it today. He is under the weather, still recovering from his birthday party. You can only drink so many Capri Suns before you have to let your system run that through. Andrew Bone, big commitment yesterday. Big in our opinion. I think that you're looking for guys. Recruiting's at so many different levels. Defensive, in a lot of ways, the defensive line recruitment's a little bit overrated. And I only mean that by not many of them can step right in and play. So you can get them. It might take them a year or two down the road to develop and do all that. But Alabama's now got not one, but 2 guys coming in physically ready to play, adding Kevontae Henry yesterday.
It's always funny when people get all upset about, maybe missing out on a 5-star or a top 100 kid. And they're like, oh, he would have started for us next year. Go look at every roster. Most of the 5-stars that are signing are not playing on the defensive line as true freshmen. It usually takes them a year or two to get adjusted and get acclimated because they're going up against, 22, 23-year-old guys on the offensive front. So, as far as Alabama, they were able to go in and get Kevontae Henry to flip his commitment from Mississippi State. Number 3 overall junior college player in the country. According to On3 Sports, number 1 edge player, 6'4", 245 pounds. Recruited for that bandit position on the defensive front. So, he's listed as an edge. He's not recruited as a wolf, not a Quay Russo type guy, but he's kind of viewed more as a LT Overton, Jamarian Latham type player for Alabama. So I thought it was a great pickup for Alabama. It's one that was kept really under the radar for the last month or two. We knew that Alabama had been pursuing him, that they were trying to bring him in for an official visit. He came in for the visit and obviously committed the day after. So big win on, in the junior college ranks for Alabama.
Yeah, and this is a guy, if you watch his tape, big, explosive, and he's chasing sideline to sideline. You want somebody that can win a one-on-one. He's that guy. And I think people are confused, but junior college are college players. It's not the same level as high school. These are a lot of guys that are experienced and bigger and came in. Again, he had signed with Oklahoma out of high school after flipping from Michigan because Courtney Morgan left to go to Washington with Kalen DeBoer, and then spent a redshirt year at Oklahoma. Jeff Levy left, went to Mississippi State. He ended up committing there. And then Alabama, and that relationship with Courtney Morgan, that they've been watching him this whole year. And, he shows plenty on film to get there. And also we got our guy Steve, the Quebec City native, coming in. We don't know I don't know how big he is. I mean, it's open for discussion, and however big he is, it's perfect. It's great weight. He looks fantastic. But again, he showed up for that barbecue. And Freddie Roach is a big guy, and he showed up at that barbecue and kind of dwarfed Freddie, didn't he, Andrew?
Yeah, he did. And I remember back last summer when he first showed up at Alabama's camp last June in 23. He was 6'3", I think 240, 245 pounds, and looked great. And you're kind of wondering, is he going to be an edge rusher? Is he going to be an outside linebacker? What position is he going to end up playing? But you kind of had a feeling, this was a kid that was going to grow a little bit and add some weight. Well, he added that weight pretty quickly, it seemed, because in about November, December, he was up to about 265, 270, and still looked the part, and has continued to get stronger, get better. I think a year in junior college, coming from Quebec City, where he's lived for the last I think 8 years of his life. I think this was a good move for him to be able to come in, get acclimated to things down here in the South, and hopefully, he's going to make a big impact. Which
Quebec City is the Christmas capital of the world.
Hey,
Andrew refuses to say it.
Y'all ever heard that before?
I'm just saying. I mean, how often do you meet a recruit from Canada in the the Christmas capital of the world? Christmas
I've
coming up.
decided that Steve, you've covered recruiting for 25 years at least.
Don't
Steve
call me old.
Yeah, you're old. 20. I've done it for 21, but Steve is probably your favorite recruit in the last 25 years.
I think he's my favorite. I think Jackson. All right, hold up. I think Jackson Lloyd is probably, who also lives in a city where Clint Eastwood was the mayor.
Yeah.
How can these kids, these storylines, we have to get out of the South because we know the South so well. But obviously, had visitors this weekend. Not a lot of, 2025 guys. A lot of them have been on campus, been in the spring, been in the summer. 11 a.m. game, they're not necessarily dying to get up and rush to that game. And I don't blame them. I mean, they play a football game to end, say, 10 o'clock at night. I mean, if you're driving 2 hours, 10 o'clock at night, grab a pizza with your friends, in bed by midnight. Anybody who played sports knows the routine. You got to wake up to get, in Tuscaloosa, even with a 2-hour drive, you got to wake up at 7 o'clock to get on the road by 8 to be there by 10. So I don't blame them.
But you're not going to have a lot of people from Texas or California, South Florida, making it to the 11 a.m. kickoff for South Carolina.
And also, it wasn't expected to be a great game. I mean, you have bigger games coming up.
Every recruit in the country was in Tuscaloosa 3 weekends ago. So
there's a lot of them.
They're trying to look at some other schools, but there's some bigger.
But there was some interesting underclassmen. I mean, I find it pretty cool that Devin Fitzgerald came. I mean, a lot of people might know his dad, pretty good football player, Andrew.
Yeah, his father, Larry Fitzgerald. Seeing him on the sideline, I saw more people were. I saw tweeting out pictures of Larry Fitzgerald. Probably didn't realize. Some of the people that were tweeting it out probably didn't realize that he was there with his son, who's a recruit in the 26 class out of Phoenix. He's got some offers. Doesn't have an offer from Alabama, but Pittsburgh's a school that has already offered him where his dad played, and some other schools have definitely shown interest. But that was a guy that was on campus. You had some other offensive linemen in the 26 class that Alabama has been recruiting, including Barry McCorder out of Georgia. Came in the day before, came in on Friday, spent some time with the coaching staff. Denivre Carr out of IMG Academy, another 26 offensive lineman that they seem to really like, and Grant Wise out of Pace High School in Milton.
Really good.
Yeah, they seem to really like him a lot. So really good underclassmen. There was a 27 kid, KJ Green, who received an offer out of Stevenson High School in Georgia. So still a pretty solid group. Obviously the big one for the weekend was Cavante Henry coming in for the official visit, making that decision for Alabama. And so it was a plus weekend for Alabama on the recruiting front.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's changed, like kids now, prospects, they take so many damn visits, like unofficial visits. That was never really, that did not really seem to be the case 4 or 5 years ago, right? I don't think that was the case. I mean, we saw them, but not at the level they're doing. I mean, some some of these guys are traveling the country pretty well. I thought Tony Mitchell set the tone for that, but there's people giving Tony a run. Of course, Tony never missed a weekend. He loved to travel and go to campuses. But you're seeing those guys, and I mean, just thinks the fans, Andrew, are going to have to accept this fact. If Bama's not at home, these kids like to go and have a good time. And I mean, anybody that says they wouldn't like to go have a good time at some of these campuses, whether it be LSU, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, all these places are fun places. I mean, you're showing up, getting the MVP treatment, people screaming your name, free food, free everything. So not very surprising. But again, Andrew, our favorite world traveler, Caleb Cunningham, was on the road and in LSU.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to get to places now. You have your school booster clubs who are certainly helping you out getting to different schools. You have the NIL, especially with these high end kids that they know that they're going to get a significant NIL package, whatever school they decide to go to. They can go out to as many colleges as they want to because they've either got the funds or they're going to have the funds. So you're going to see a lot of recruits that are going to be out at different schools, even if it's just unofficial visits. It's a lot easier these days. And with Caleb Cunningham, he's been somewhere, I think, every weekend this year. Now, most of them are all around the Southeast, but I think you like seeing them at different schools rather than just the same school. Like, we saw Ryan Williams last year. Everybody was so concerned because he kept going back to Auburn, or Quay Russo and James Smith, who I think they went to Auburn 5 or 6 times during the regular season, and everybody just assumed that's where they were going to go. They didn't, but I think it's better when you start seeing kids go to different schools rather than just the same school over and over and over, because then you start getting a lot more concern. And Caleb was down in LSU this past weekend, seemed to have a great time, talked highly about the atmosphere. But at the same time, as he said after every single visit, had a great time. I'm still locked in with my commitment to Alabama. So that's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear I'm reconsidering my decision or my commitments at they used to say 90%. We used to always hear, my commitment's at 90%.
No more.
Is it really? But
no more. Yeah.
But a lot of them are just having fun and enjoying the process. But it's certainly, putting that stress level more so for fans. I think we get it. We see it all. We've seen it for so many years. But for the stress level for Alabama fans, when they see a top end guy go elsewhere on a weekend visit and it's a great atmosphere and a great game, they start to be concerned. But
I think it's just human nature. You know what I mean? I think that it's not necessarily recruiting related. My friends that worry about recruits are my friends that worry about other stuff, a little bit of anxiety and angst about stuff. So it's not surprising they're that way in the game. I mean, the first quarter, they don't get a 3rd and 1. I got 2 of my friends I got to mute instantly for 4 hours. That 3rd and 1 will get them wrapped up. But I do think you make a good point. The biggest thing here to me is these guys are admitting it. They're not showing up on campus out of the blue. They're saying I'm going. And when they committed, they said they were going. I think, Andrew, and I'm looking here now, I think people forget the extent that Ryan Williams traveled last year. In November, he was at USC. In October, he was at Georgia. In January, he was at Texas A&M. October, November, and September, October, and November, he was at Auburn. But at the end of the day, his visits to Alabama were 19, and I guarantee you we did not catch every one of his visits to Alabama. So that thing was well into the 20s. Andrew, we still have one flip this week with Cavante Henry. We've got our eye out. We've got a BOL flip watch, which you can find at BamaOnLine.com, a forecast where we're feeling pretty good about Marshall Pritchett, Georgia, tight end, having a good senior year, and he's committed to North Carolina.
Yeah, we've talked about Marshall a few times, more so during the summer because he took an official visit, and he's kept things really quiet regarding his recruitment because UNC just really didn't want him taking visits after he committed. But took an official visit during the summer back in June, had visited back in the spring. The interest continued to grow with Alabama. Now, Alabama ends up getting a commitment from Caleb Edwards, who's the number 6 tight end in the country. But we knew going into the season that they still wanted to add one tight end. Now, Andrew Olish out of Michigan, out of Pennsylvania, who's committed to Michigan. Both of those guys, Pritchett and Olish, were in Tuscaloosa for the Georgia game a few weeks ago. So still a lot of interest there. But with Marshall Pritchett, Brian Ellis, Alabama's tight ends coach, went and saw him play last Friday night. There's very, very high interest from the Alabama staff in him. They watched him closely this senior season, really like him a lot. So it's not one of those situations where it's, hey, we're waiting to see what happens with one guy over the other. It's almost a first come, first served situation. They really like both of those guys a lot. And I think one of them's probably getting very close to making a decision. And Pritch is probably the one that we're watching the closest right now.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Andrew, we'll be doing a show later in the week for you BamaOnLine people. We're headed to the message board now. We appreciate everyone that tunes in. Normally we do this segment with Joseph Hastings. He was sick today, but we do look for a smaller recruiting show later in the week and also other things to look forward to. We do the post-game show on Saturday. Charlie, Blake, and Jimmy Stein will all have a preview of the Tennessee game, which is it's a hard one to pick. I'm still mulling it over. I don't know what – I think after the game I'll say, I knew that was going to happen, but I'll be lying.
None of them are going to be easy. Hey, we've all made these big prediction blowouts over the last few weeks. If you go back and look at our predictions, the 20-point wins. But I don't think any of them are going to be easy. You got Tennessee, you got Missouri, LSU, Mercer.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if anybody's picking 20-point wins these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, but
that would be
well.
That's when they'll win. That's when they'll win by 20. That's when they'll win by 20 each time.
I know. I think Mercer might be undefeated when they come to Tuscaloosa, but
least surprising thing I've heard. Probably have a second round draft pick at quarterback.
And then you got Auburn, so it's just like, hey, I'm not picking. I'm not doing any more 20+ point wins. So maybe
I'm doing it. I'm absolutely doing it.
Maybe if I do a 3-point win or 7-point win, they will win by. They will win by 20.
Hey, whatever you can contribute. Whatever you can contribute, we appreciate it as Alabama fans. Well, Andrew, till later in the week, we appreciate you jumping in here. You guys can find us at BamaOnLine, the round table, where we're headed right now. A lot of good discussion there. A lot of defensive coordinators, a lot of people discussing pellet grills, horror shows. We discussed just about everything over there, but hope to see you soon, Andrew.
Yep. Thanks, Tim. Thank you guys for watching. Roll Tide.
We say that like he's a guest on the show. We're not going to hang up and text each other.
They'll bring me back.
Yeah, we're going to hang up and text each other mean stuff right about now. Well, thank you all. We'll see you next week.